Elena Vasquez pressed her face against the cold window of the research station and watched the purple sunrise paint the alien sky. 3 months on Kepler 442c, and she still found the double suns beautiful. The research outpost was small, just 12 scientists studying the strange life forms on this distant world. Elena loved her work here. As the team's xenobiologist, she spent her days learning about creatures that no human had ever seen before. The quiet morning was broken by the sound of heavy footsteps in the corridor. Commander Hayes appeared in the doorway, his face serious. Behind him stood 2 figures in dark environmental suits. Elena could see the outline of weapons on their belts. "Dr. Vasquez, we have a situation," Hayes said. "These are Captain Jorik and Lieutenant Nara from the Frontier Patrol Ship Defender. They brought us something unusual." Elena turned away from the window. "What kind of something?" Captain Jorik stepped forward. His voice was rough, like he had been shouting for hours. "We found a ship drifting in space 2 days ago. Zelhari vessel. Everyone aboard was dead except for 3 cubs. The whole adult crew was gone. We think a plasma storm hit them." Elena felt her breath catch in her throat. The Zelhari were legendary across human space. 8 feet tall, covered in dark fur, with 6 powerful limbs and claws that could cut through steel. They were the most feared predators in the galaxy. Their homeworld was a nightmare of constant hunting and violence. Most humans had never seen a living Zelhari and hoped they never would. "You brought Zelhari cubs here?" Elena asked. "We had no choice," Lieutenant Nara said. Her voice was tired. "The nearest Zelhari world is 6 weeks away. These cubs are young. They need constant care or they will die. We cannot keep them on a patrol ship." Commander Hayes looked uncomfortable. "Elena, I know this is not your usual work, but you are our expert on alien life forms. We need someone to care for them until we can arrange transport back to Zelhari space." Elena thought about what she knew of the Zelhari. Every story she had heard painted them as monsters. They hunted in packs. They showed no mercy. They were said to eat their enemies alive. But she was a scientist. She knew that fear often created lies about things people did not understand. "Where are they now?" she asked. "Cargo Bay 3, Captain Jorik said. "We set up a temporary habitat. But, Doctor, I must warn you, even as cubs, they are dangerous. Their claws are already sharp. Their instincts are to hunt and kill." Elena nodded. "I understand. Take me to see them." The walk to Cargo Bay 3 felt longer than usual. Elena's mind raced with everything she had read about Zelhari biology. They were mammals, but their social structure was more complex than most pack animals. They formed emotional bonds that lasted their entire lives. They mourned their dead with ritual howls that could be heard for miles. The cargo bay doors slid open with a soft hiss. Elena stepped inside and stopped. In the center of the room, 3 small figures huddled together in a makeshift nest of blankets and heating elements. They were each about the size of a large dog, but their proportions were all wrong. 6 limbs folded awkwardly beneath them. Their fur was darker than she expected, almost black with silver markings. The moment Elena entered, all 3 cubs turned toward her. Their eyes were large and bright yellow, filled with fear and confusion. The largest cub, probably the oldest, moved protectively in front of the other 2. "How old are they?" Elena whispered. "Our best guess is 6 to 8 months, Lieutenant Nara replied. "In human terms, they would be like toddlers." Elena took a slow step forward. The cubs tensed, but they did not run. She knelt down and extended her hand, palm up, the way she would approach any frightened animal. The largest cub sniffed the air, then made a sound that was part growl, part whimper. "Hello there," Elena said softly. "I know you are scared. I know you miss your family. But you are safe now." One of the smaller cubs, the tiniest one, took a hesitant step toward Elena. Its siblings immediately moved to block its path, but the little one pushed past them. It approached Elena slowly, its nose twitching as it investigated her scent. Elena remained perfectly still as the cub came close enough to touch her hand with its nose. The contact lasted only a moment before the cub jumped back, but Elena saw something important in its eyes. Not hatred or bloodlust, but curiosity and desperate loneliness. "They are just children," Elena said, looking back at the others. "Frightened children who lost their parents." Commander Hayes shifted uncomfortably. "Elena, are you sure about this? If something goes wrong—" "Nothing will go wrong," Elena said with more confidence than she felt. "Give me access to the biological databases. I need to learn everything I can about Zelhari nutrition, sleep patterns, and social behavior, and I will need help setting up a proper habitat." Over the next several hours, Elena threw herself into research. She learned that Zelhari cubs needed high-protein foods every few hours. They required warm sleeping areas that mimicked the underground dens of their homeworld. Most importantly, they were social creatures who became depressed and sick if left alone for too long. By evening, Elena had transformed one of the unused laboratories into a temporary nursery. She installed heating lamps, brought in soft materials for nesting, and set up a feeding station. The cubs watched her work with growing interest, especially the smallest one. When Elena offered them their first meal, a specially prepared protein mixture, the cubs hesitated. The largest one stepped forward first, testing the food carefully before allowing the others to eat. Elena noted this behavior. Even as youngsters, they had a clear social hierarchy. As the days passed, Elena established a routine. She fed the cubs every 4 hours, cleaned their habitat, and spent time simply sitting with them. She began to notice their individual personalities. The largest, which she privately called Alpha, was protective and serious. The middle cub was playful and curious. The smallest was shy, but the most trusting. The breakthrough came during the second week. Elena was sitting quietly in their habitat when the smallest cub approached her and climbed into her lap. Its siblings watched nervously, but when nothing bad happened, they relaxed. Elena gently stroked the cub's fur, and it made a sound like a cat's purr, but deeper and more musical. "You need names," Elena said softly. She looked at each cub in turn. "Thrak for you," she said to the largest. It was a Zelhari word she had found that meant protector. "Zara for you," she told the middle cub, using a word that meant swift one. "And Kes," she said to the smallest, which meant little star. The cubs seemed to respond to their names. When Elena called to them, they turned their heads and made soft, chirping sounds. Other station personnel remained afraid of them, but Elena saw past their fearsome appearance to their true nature. They were intelligent, emotional creatures, capable of forming deep bonds. Elena began to love them like they were her own children. She worried when they seemed sad. She smiled when they played together. She felt proud when they learned new things. These were not the monsters from the stories. They were just babies who needed care and affection. She had no idea that her time with them was running out, or that her love for 3 orphaned predator cubs would soon cost her everything. 6 weeks had passed since the Zelhari cubs arrived at the research station. Elena had grown closer to Thrak, Zara, and little Kes than she had ever imagined possible. They followed her around the laboratory like devoted pets, though she knew they were far more intelligent than any Earth animal. Thrak had learned to open simple doors. Zara could solve basic puzzles. Kes had started making sounds that almost seemed like attempts at human speech. The cubs had grown larger, too. Thrak was now the size of a small pony, his protective instincts growing stronger each day. He would position himself between Elena and any strangers who entered their habitat. Zara had become incredibly agile, able to climb walls and ceilings with ease. Kes remained the smallest, but her bond with Elena was the strongest. She would curl up against Elena's side during rest periods, purring contentedly. Elena was reviewing transport schedules when the first alarm sounded. The station's proximity sensors had detected an unknown ship approaching at high speed. Commander Hayes called an emergency meeting in the main conference room. "The ship is not responding to our communications," Hayes said, his face grim. "They are flying without any identification signals. Long-range scans suggest it is a modified cargo hauler, but it shows signs of heavy weapons modifications." Dr. Singh, the station's physicist, leaned forward nervously. "Pirates?" "Most likely," Hayes replied. "We are sending a general distress signal, but the nearest patrol ship is 4 days away. We need to prepare for the worst." Elena felt her stomach drop. "What about the cubs?" Hayes looked uncomfortable. "Elena, if these are pirates, they will not care about research animals. You need to focus on your own safety." "Those cubs are not research animals," Elena said firmly. "They are intelligent beings, and if pirates board this station, they will either kill the cubs for sport or sell them to illegal fighting rings. I will not let that happen." Security Chief Martinez spoke up. "Dr. Vasquez, our security team has 6 members and basic weapons. If a pirate ship attacks us, we cannot guarantee anyone's safety." The meeting continued for another hour. But Elena barely listened. Her mind was focused on Thrak, Zara, and Kes. She had promised to keep them safe, and she meant to keep that promise no matter what happened. The unknown ship arrived 2 hours later. It was larger than Elena had expected, bristling with weapon ports and scarred by countless battles. The hull was painted in the red and black colors that marked it as belonging to the Void Serpent Cartel, one of the most dangerous pirate organizations in human space. Captain Vex Malachar announced himself over the station's communication system. His voice was rough and cruel, speaking with the accent of the Outer Rim worlds where law and order meant nothing. "Research Station Kepler 442C, this is Captain Malachar of the raider ship Bloodfang. You will shut down your shields and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in the deaths of your entire crew. You have 10 minutes to comply." Commander Hayes tried to negotiate, offering to transfer valuable research data in exchange for safe passage. Malachar laughed at the suggestion. "We take what we want, human. Your data, your equipment, your lives if you displease us. Compliance is not negotiable." Elena ran back to the laboratory where she had been caring for the cubs. They sensed her distress immediately. Thrak moved to her side, his yellow eyes alert and concerned. Zara chittered softly, a sound she made when she was worried. Kes pressed close to Elena's leg, seeking comfort. "I know you can sense danger," Elena said to them quietly. "Bad people are coming, people who would hurt you. I need you to stay close to me, no matter what happens." The station shuddered as the pirate ship docked forcefully with the outer airlock. Elena heard the hiss of cutting torches as the pirates burned through the station's security doors. The emergency lighting kicked on, bathing everything in red. Elena gathered emergency supplies from around the laboratory. She found a portable power source, some basic tools, and an emergency plasma cutter used for cutting through metal in case of hull breaches. The plasma cutter was not designed as a weapon, but it was better than nothing. The 3 cubs seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. They stayed close to Elena as she led them deeper into the station, toward the bio-laboratory where she had done most of her research. The bio-lab had reinforced doors and an independent life support system. If she could get them there, they might be able to hold out until help arrived. The sounds of violence echoed through the station corridors. Elena heard shouting, the distinctive whine of energy weapons, and the screams of her colleagues. She forced herself not to think about what was happening to her friends. Right now, her only responsibility was to the 3 young lives that depended on her. They reached the biolab just as Elena heard heavy footsteps approaching down the main corridor. She quickly sealed the door and activated the lab's emergency lockdown protocols. The thick metal barriers slid into place, creating multiple layers of protection between them and the pirates. Elena set up their defensive position in the center of the lab, using overturned tables and equipment to create a barrier. The cubs seemed to understand what she was doing. Thrak positioned himself where he could watch the main entrance. Zara climbed up to a high vantage point among the ceiling supports. Kes stayed close to Elena, her small body trembling with fear. "I know you are scared," Elena whispered to them. "I am scared too. But we are Pack now, and Pack protects Pack. No matter what happens, we stay together." The first explosions came 20 minutes later. The pirates were using heavy cutting equipment to breach the laboratory's defenses. Elena could hear Captain Malakar's voice shouting orders to his crew. They had found valuable research equipment in other parts of the station, but they were not satisfied. They wanted everything, including whatever was hidden behind the biolab's reinforced doors. Elena checked the plasma cutter's power cell. It was fully charged, good for maybe an hour of continuous use. She had never used it as a weapon before, but she had no choice. She thought about her parents back on Earth, about the peaceful life she had left behind to come to this distant world. She thought about her friends and colleagues, hoping they had found somewhere safe to hide. But mostly she thought about Thrak, Zara, and Kes. These three cubs had been orphaned once already. They had lost their birth parents to the cold vacuum of space. Elena would not let them lose another family to the violence and greed of pirates. The cutting sounds grew louder. Sparks began to fall from the laboratory door as the pirates burned through the outer security barrier. Elena estimated they had maybe 30 minutes before the defenses failed completely. She looked at each of her cubs in turn. Thrak met her gaze steadily, his young face already showing the noble features he would have as an adult. Zara gave her a soft trill of affection. Kes nuzzled against her hand, seeking reassurance that Elena freely gave. "Whatever happens," Elena said softly, "you three are the best thing that ever happened to me. You taught me what it means to love something more than your own life." The laboratory shuddered as the pirates breached the second security door. Elena gripped the plasma cutter tightly and prepared to fight for the three small lives that meant everything to her. She had no illusions about her chances. She was one human with an improvised weapon facing an unknown number of heavily armed pirates. But she had something they did not understand. She had love, and love could make even the weakest person stronger than they ever imagined possible. The final door began to glow as the pirates started cutting through it. Elena stood up, positioning herself between the entrance and her cubs. She activated the plasma cutter, and its blue energy blade hummed to life. "Come on, then," she whispered to the approaching enemy. "Let us see what you are made of." The final security door collapsed with a thunderous crash. Three pirates burst through the smoking opening, their weapons raised and ready. Elena had expected them to be human, but the first two were Coraxians, reptilian creatures with scales like armor and eyes that glowed red in the emergency lighting. The third was something she did not recognize, tall and thin with too many joints in its limbs. Captain Vex Malakar entered behind his crew. He was a massive Coraxian, nearly 7 feet tall, with scars covering his face and neck. His weapon was a heavy plasma rifle that could punch holes through starship hulls. When he saw Elena standing alone with her small plasma cutter, he laughed. "One little human scientist with a tool," he said in his rough voice. "This is what caused us so much trouble?" "Captain, look at this," one of the other pirates called out. He had spotted the cubs behind Elena's makeshift barricade. "Zelhari young ones. These will bring good money in the fighting pits." Elena felt rage surge through her body. "You will not touch them." Malakar stepped closer, his weapon aimed casually at Elena's chest. You are in no position to make demands, human. Stand aside, and we might let you live long enough to watch your pets tear each other apart for our entertainment. They are not pets, Elena said firmly. They are children. Innocent children who have already lost everything once. I will not let you hurt them. Then you will die with them, Malachar said, raising his rifle. Elena moved faster than she had ever moved in her life. The plasma cutter's beam sliced through the air where Malachar's head had been a moment before. The pirate captain stumbled backward, surprised by her speed and determination. The laboratory erupted into chaos. Elena dove behind her barricade as energy bolts scorched the air around her. The cubs scattered, their natural agility serving them well as they found cover among the laboratory equipment. Elena heard Thrak growl, a sound deeper and more threatening than she had ever heard from him before. Elena used her knowledge of the laboratory to her advantage. She triggered the emergency release on several chemical storage units, filling the air with thick, choking smoke. The pirates cursed as their visibility dropped to almost nothing. Elena moved through the familiar space like a ghost, striking where the pirates least expected. Her plasma cutter found its target twice. The first pirate, the unrecognizable alien, dropped to the floor clutching his wounded leg. The second, one of the Caraxians, screamed as Elena's improvised weapon burned through his weapon and into his shoulder. But Elena was badly outnumbered. More pirates poured through the breach in the laboratory door. She counted at least 6 enemies now, all armed with military-grade weapons. Her plasma cutter was running low on power, and she had nowhere left to retreat. An energy bolt caught her in the side, spinning her around and sending her crashing into a bank of computer terminals. Pain flared through her body, but she forced herself to keep moving. Behind her, she could hear the cubs making distressed sounds. They were frightened, but they had not abandoned her. Elena triggered another emergency system, this time releasing the laboratory's automated fire suppression system. Streams of flame retardant filled the air, making it even harder for the pirates to see and breathe. She used the confusion to change positions, getting behind a group of 3 pirates who were trying to corner Zera. The plasma cutter slashed through the first pirate's weapon, then across the second one's back. The third spun around to face Elena, but Thrak leaped from his hiding place. The young Zelhari was no longer a helpless cub. 6 months of growth and the awakening of his predator instincts had made him formidable. His claws raked across the pirate's face, sending him stumbling backward into Elena's waiting weapon. "Good boy," Elena whispered to Thrak, but there was no time for celebration. Captain Malachar had regrouped his remaining crew. Elena could see at least 4 pirates still standing, including the captain himself. Her plasma cutter's power indicator was blinking red, warning her that she had only minutes of energy left. A plan formed in Elena's mind. It was desperate and would almost certainly cost her life, but it might save the cubs. The laboratory's main support beam ran directly above where the pirates were positioned. If she could weaken it enough, the ceiling would collapse and crush her enemies. But she would have to get close to do it, putting herself in the direct line of fire. Elena looked back at Thrak, Zera, and Kess. They were huddled together behind an overturned table, their yellow eyes wide with fear and confusion. They trusted her completely. They believed she could protect them from anything. "I love you," she whispered to them. "All of you. Remember that." Elena charged out from behind her cover, screaming at the top of her lungs. The pirates turned their weapons toward her, energy bolts filling the air like deadly lightning. Elena felt one beam burn across her shoulder, then another through her leg. She stumbled but kept moving. She reached the support beam just as Malachar's rifle found its mark. The plasma bolt struck Elena center mass, spinning her around and dropping her to her knees. Blood poured from the wound, and she could feel her strength leaving her body. But she still had the plasma cutter, and it still had power. Elena raised the device with shaking hands and aimed it at the support beam's weakest point. The blue energy beam cut deep into the metal, sending sparks flying in all directions. "Stop her!" Malachar roared, but it was too late. The support beam cracked with a sound like thunder. Elena poured every remaining bit of power from the plasma cutter into the cut, widening it until the metal could no longer support the weight above. The laboratory ceiling began to groan and buckle. Elena rolled away from the collapsing beam, using her last remaining strength to put distance between herself and the crushing weight of falling debris. The pirates realized what was happening and tried to run, but they were too slow. Tons of metal and stone crashed down, burying Malachar and his crew beneath the rubble. The laboratory fell silent except for the sound of settling debris and the soft whimper of frightened cubs. Elena lay on her back, staring up at the emergency lights through the smoke and dust. She could feel her life bleeding away, but she felt no fear. She had done what she set out to do. Soft footsteps approached through the wreckage. Elena turned her head to see 3 familiar shapes moving toward her. Thrak reached her first, his massive form surprisingly gentle as he lay down beside her. Zara curled up against her other side, trilling softly in distress. Little Kess climbed onto Elena's chest, her weight comforting despite the pain it caused. "You are safe," Elena whispered to them, her voice growing weaker with each word. "The bad people cannot hurt you anymore." Thrak nuzzled her face with his nose, making the same purring sound he had made when they first met. Zara touched her hand with one of her claws, careful not to scratch the human skin. Kess pressed her face against Elena's neck, her small body trembling. Elena tried to speak their names one last time. Thrak, Zara, Kess. Each name was softer than the last, but the cubs heard every syllable. They would remember her voice for the rest of their lives. The world grew dim around the edges. Elena felt no pain now, only a deep sense of peace. She had kept her promise. She had protected her pack. In her final moments, she understood something profound about love and sacrifice. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give is not your life for someone else's, but your death, so that others might live. As darkness claimed her, Elena felt 3 warm bodies pressed against her own. She was not alone. She would never be alone again, because her love for these 3 orphaned cubs had created a bond that would last forever. The emergency lights flickered and went out. The laboratory fell into darkness. But in that darkness, 3 young Zelhari kept vigil over the body of the human who had given everything for them. They would not leave her side until rescue arrived. They would not forget what she had done, and they would spend the rest of their lives making sure that her sacrifice meant something. Elena Vasquez had died as she lived, with love in her heart and courage in her soul. The galaxy would never be the same because of her choice. The rescue ships arrived 6 hours after the laboratory fell silent. The first vessel to dock was a human patrol cruiser responding to the distress signal. Captain Torres and his security team found a station littered with bodies and destruction. Most of the research staff had been killed during the initial attack, but a few had survived by hiding in storage compartments and maintenance shafts. The real surprise came when the second ship arrived. It was a Zelhari warship, sleek and deadly, painted in the ceremonial colors of pack leader Theron's hunting fleet. The massive vessel dwarfed the human patrol cruiser, its weapon arrays capable of destroying entire cities. Captain Torres was nervous about making contact with the Zelhari. First contact protocols existed, but they had rarely been used. The Zelhari kept to themselves, and most humans were grateful for that arrangement. When pack leader Theron requested permission to board the research station, Torres had little choice but to agree. Pack leader Theron was everything the stories had said and more. He stood 8.5 feet tall, his dark fur marked with silver scars from countless battles. His four arms moved with deadly grace, and his yellow eyes held an intelligence that was both alien and familiar. Behind him came a dozen of his packmates, all armed and ready for war. "We received the distress signal from our cubs," Theron said in heavily accented but clear human speech. "Where are they?" Torres led the Zelhari delegation through the damaged station to the biolaboratory. The collapsed ceiling had been partially cleared by rescue workers, but the scene of destruction was still overwhelming. Torres watched Pack Leader Theron's reaction carefully, ready to call for help if the massive alien became violent. But Theron's response was not what Torres expected. The pack leader stopped when he saw Elena's body, still surrounded by the three cubs who refused to leave her side. His ears flattened against his skull, and he made a sound deep in his throat that was part growl, part keen of mourning. "Tell me what happened here," Theron commanded. Torres explained what they had learned from the surviving station personnel and the security recordings. He described how Elena had cared for the cubs, how she had protected them during the pirate attack, and how she had died bringing down the laboratory ceiling to save their lives. As Torres spoke, something remarkable happened. Pack Leader Theron knelt beside Elena's body, his massive form suddenly gentle. He reached out with one clawed hand and touched her forehead, a gesture that was clearly significant in Zelhari culture. The three cubs looked up at their pack leader with eyes full of grief and confusion. Thrak, now the size of a large wolf, moved protectively closer to Elena's body. Zara chittered softly, a sound of deep distress. Little Kess, still the smallest, pressed herself against Elena's side as if she could somehow bring her human mother back to life. Theron spoke to the cubs in rapid Zelhari, his voice surprisingly gentle. Torres could not understand the words, but he could hear the tone of comfort and reassurance. After several minutes, Theron turned back to the humans. "This human female. She was not kin to our cubs by blood," he said slowly, as if choosing each word carefully. "But she became kin by choice. She protected Pack Young with her own life. This is the highest honor in our culture." "We had no idea she meant so much to them," Torres replied. "Dr. Vasquez was just doing her job." Theron's expression grew intense. "No, Captain. What she did was far more than any job. She chose to die so that our young could live. In our culture, such a choice creates a debt that can never be repaid." Over the following days, more Zelhari ships arrived in the system. Torres was amazed to see representatives from dozens of different packs, all coming to witness something he did not fully understand. The Zelhari set up a temporary camp on the station's largest cargo deck, turning it into a gathering place filled with alien ceremonies and rituals. Dr. Sarah Chen, the station's anthropologist and one of the few survivors, worked with Torres to understand what was happening. She had studied Zelhari culture from a distance, but this was the first time humans had been able to observe their social rituals firsthand. "From what I can determine," Chen explained to Torres, "Elena has been declared something called Thaknala. It translates roughly to Guardian of the Pack. It's a title that has never been given to a non-Zelhari before." The cubs, now formally adopted into Pack Leader Theron's family group, had become central figures in the growing ceremony. They told their story over and over again, using a combination of sounds, gestures, and simple words that painted a picture of Elena's sacrifice for any Zelhari who would listen. Torres watched Thrak describe the final battle, his young voice growing strong as he imitated Elena's movements. Zara demonstrated her human mother's gentleness by carefully grooming one of the smaller pack members. Kess, despite her size, had learned to speak Elena's name in perfect human pronunciation, a skill that amazed the assembled Zelhari. On the third day, Pack Leader Theron approached Torres with a request that changed everything. He wanted to take Elena's body back to the Zelhari homeworld for a funeral ceremony unlike anything in their recorded history. She died for our young, Theron explained. She must be honored as one of our own. Her sacrifice will be remembered in the hunting songs of every pack in Zelhari space. Torres was uncertain. He had no authority to make such a decision, and he was not sure how Earth's government would react. But Dr. Chen convinced him to agree. This is bigger than politics or protocol, she said. Elena created a bridge between our species with her sacrifice. We should honor that bridge. The funeral preparations took a week. Zelhari craftsmen worked day and night to create a burial shroud worthy of their new hero. They wove together fibers from their homeworld with metals from human space, creating something that represented the bond between two very different species. The cubs participated in every aspect of the ceremony. They had learned human words to describe Elena's qualities: brave, kind, loving, fierce. They taught these words to the adult Zelhari, who incorporated them into their traditional funeral chants. The most moving moment came when pack leader Theron announced that the cubs would take Elena's family name as their own pack identifier. Thrak Vasquez, Zara Vasquez, and Kes Vasquez would carry their human mother's name for the rest of their lives, ensuring that her memory lived on in Zelhari society. But the most significant development was Theron's declaration that Elena's sacrifice had created a new tradition in Zelhari culture. Every warrior would now carry a blade inscribed with her name, a reminder that true strength came not from the ability to kill, but from the willingness to die, protecting those who could not protect themselves. The ceremony concluded with a ritual that brought Torres to tears. Every Zelhari present, from the mightiest pack leader to the smallest cub, howled Elena's name to the stars. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, a primal song of grief and gratitude that seemed to shake the very foundations of the station. As the Zelhari ships prepared to depart, taking Elena's body home for final burial, pack leader Theron made one last gesture. He presented Captain Torres with a small blade, inscribed with Elena's name in both human script and Zelhari claw marks. "She was yours first," Theron said, "but she became ours through her choice. Keep this, so your people will remember what one human did for the children of another species." Torres watched the Zelhari fleet disappear into hyperspace, carrying Elena toward a destiny she never could have imagined. A simple xenobiologist from Earth was about to become a legend among the most feared predators in the galaxy. The three cubs pressed their faces against the viewports of their new home, watching the research station grow smaller behind them. They were leaving the place where they had lost their human mother, but they carried her memory with them like a sacred flame. Elena Vasquez was dead, but her story was just beginning. Across Zelhari space, in hunting lodges and warrior halls, pack singers would soon begin telling the tale of the small human who stood against impossible odds to protect three orphaned cubs. And in the years to come, that story would grow into something magnificent and strange, a legend that would change the relationship between humans and Zelhari forever. 5 years had passed since the incident at Research Station Kepler 442c. The story of Elena Vasquez had spread throughout human space and beyond, but nowhere had it taken root more deeply than among the Zelhari themselves. What had begun as a simple act of compassion in a remote laboratory had become the foundation of a new cultural tradition that spanned the galaxy. Captain Maria Santos of the Frontier Patrol ship Horizon received her first glimpse of this transformation during a routine inspection of the trade station orbiting Proxima Centauri. As she walked through the main commercial district, she noticed something unusual in one of the weapon shops. Behind the counter, displayed with obvious reverence, was a collection of ceremonial blades, unlike anything she had ever seen. The shopkeeper was a grizzled human veteran named Jack Morrison, who had spent 20 years trading with various alien species. When Santos asked about the blades, Morrison's expression grew serious. "Those are Elena Ka," he said respectfully. Zelhari ceremonial weapons. Every warrior in their society carries one now. Each blade is inscribed with the name Elena Vasquez and a passage from their sacred texts about protecting the innocent. Santos examined one of the blades more closely. The workmanship was extraordinary, far superior to anything humans could produce. The metal seemed to glow with an inner light, and the inscriptions were carved so precisely they looked like they had been written with a laser. "Why do they carry blades named after a human?" Santos asked. Morrison told her the story. He had heard it from Zelhari traders who passed through the station regularly. They spoke of Elena with a reverence usually reserved for their greatest heroes. To them, she was not just a human who had died protecting Zelhari cubs. She was the embodiment of everything their warrior culture claimed to value: courage, loyalty, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for those under your protection. Santos left the weapon shop with a Elena Ka blade of her own, a gift from Morrison, who said every human should carry a reminder of what their species was capable of achieving. She wore it on her uniform belt and was surprised by the reactions it generated during her travels. On a supply station in the Vega system, a group of Zelhari merchants approached her with obvious respect. They had seen the Elena Ka blade and wanted to hear her thoughts on the human female who had inspired its creation. Santos found herself telling Elena's story to an audience of fearsome predators who listened with the attention usually reserved for sacred rituals. The leader of the merchant group, an elderly female named Karaneth, shared her own perspective on Elena's legacy. "Before Elena Ka, we were warriors who fought only for our own packs," she said in careful human speech. "But Elena showed us that true strength comes from protecting all cubs, even those not of your blood. This lesson has changed how we see ourselves and others." Santos learned that the changes went far beyond ceremonial weapons. Zelhari society had experienced a transformation that their own historians considered unprecedented. The warrior packs that had once fought endless territorial battles were now working together to protect civilian settlements throughout their territory. Pirate attacks in Zelhari space had dropped to almost nothing, as raiding crews learned that attacking any civilian target would bring down the fury of every Zelhari warrior in the sector. The most visible symbol of this change was the formation of Elena's Claws, an elite unit of Zelhari warriors dedicated to protecting research stations and civilian outposts. The three original cubs, now grown into powerful adults, led this organization. Thrak Vasquez had become a legendary figure among his people, known for his tactical brilliance and unwavering commitment to protecting the innocent. Zara Vasquez was famous for her speed and agility, able to single-handedly defeat entire pirate crews. Kes Vasquez, despite being the smallest, had developed into a master strategist whose plans had saved dozens of human settlements from attack. Santos had the opportunity to meet Kes in person during a diplomatic conference on the neutral world of New Geneva. The young Zelhari female was now nearly 7 feet tall, but she still carried herself with the gentle demeanor that Elena had nurtured in her as a cub. "Your Elena mother taught me that size does not determine worth," Kes said in fluent human speech. "She was smaller than any of us, but her heart was larger than the stars. Everything I do to honor her memory." The conference was itself a testament to Elena's legacy. For the first time in recorded history, humans and Zelhari were negotiating a formal alliance. The treaty they were discussing would establish joint patrols of the frontier regions, with human technological expertise supporting Zelhari military prowess. Ambassador Rebecca Walsh, the chief human negotiator, told Santos that Elena's story had made the alliance possible. "5 years ago, most humans saw the Zelhari as monsters," Walsh explained, "and the Zelhari saw us as weak prey animals. Elena's sacrifice showed both species that appearances can be deceiving. She proved that humans are capable of incredible courage, and that Zelhari are capable of incredible loyalty. Without her example, we would never have found common ground. The most moving part of Santos's journey came during her visit to the Zelhari homeworld of Takvera. She was among the first humans ever granted permission to witness the annual Night of the Guardian, the ceremony commemorating Elena's sacrifice. As darkness fell over the ancient Zelhari capital, Santos joined thousands of warriors gathering in the great amphitheater at the heart of the city. Pack leaders from across the galaxy had come to participate in the ritual, bringing with them the hunting songs and stories of their people. The ceremony began with the three cubs, now known throughout Zelhari space as the Guardians of the Legacy. Thrak, Zera, and Kes stood before the assembled multitude and told Elena's story in their native tongue, their voices carrying clearly through the night air. Santos could not understand the words, but she could feel the emotion behind them. The crowd listened in absolute silence as the three survivors described their human mother's gentleness, her courage, and her final sacrifice. When they spoke Elena's name, the entire amphitheater seemed to vibrate with reverence. Then came the moment Santos would remember for the rest of her life. Every Zelhari present raised their Elena Ka blade toward the stars and howled their hero's name. The sound was unlike anything Santos had ever experienced, primal and beautiful and heartbreakingly sad. It went on for nearly 10 minutes, a song of grief and gratitude that seemed to reach across the galaxy itself. As the ceremony concluded, Pack Leader Theron, now ancient but still imposing, approached Santos with a special gift. It was an Elena Ka blade unlike any other, crafted from metal taken from the destroyed research station where Elena had died. The inscription was not just Elena's name, but a passage in both human and Zelhari script that translated to, "She who died for strangers became mother to all cubs." "Take this back to your people," Theron said. "Tell them that Elena Vasquez is remembered not just on our world, but in the hearts of every Zelhari warrior. Her name will be sung until the last star grows cold." Santos returned to human space, carrying more than just a ceremonial weapon. She carried the knowledge that one person's choice to love beyond the boundaries of species had created ripples that would last for generations. Elena's sacrifice had given birth to something unprecedented in galactic history, a true alliance between predator and prey, founded not on mutual need, but on mutual respect. Research stations throughout the frontier now flew both human and Zelhari flags. Mixed crews worked together to push the boundaries of scientific knowledge. Children of both species learned each other's languages and customs. The pirates and raiders who had once terrorized the frontier regions found themselves facing a united front. Human technology and Zelhari ferocity proved to be an unbeatable combination. Trade routes that had been plagued by violence for decades became safe passages where families could travel without fear. But perhaps the most important change was in how both species saw themselves. Humans learned that they did not have to be physically powerful to be brave. Zelhari learned that true strength came not from the ability to kill, but from the willingness to protect. Elena's example had shown them both that heroism was not about species or size or strength, it was about love, and the choices people made when love was tested by impossible odds. Every year, on the anniversary of Elena's death, humans and Zelhari gathered together in settlements across the galaxy. They shared stories, exchanged gifts, and remembered the xenobiologist who had changed everything by refusing to abandon 3 orphaned cubs. In the years to come, historians would mark Elena's sacrifice as the turning point in galactic history, the moment when 2 very different species learned to see past their fears and prejudices. But for those who had known her, she would always be remembered as something simpler and more profound, a woman who loved without conditions and died without regrets, proving that even the smallest person could cast a shadow that reached across the stars. Elena Vasquez was gone. But her legacy lived on in every blade that bore her name, in every partnership between human and Zelhari, and in every act of courage performed by people who remembered that true heroism meant protecting those who could not protect themselves. The cubs she had died to save were now legends themselves. But they never forgot the gentle human who had taught them that family was not about blood or species. It was about the choice to love something more than your own life. And in the vastness of space among the songs of ancient warriors, Elena's name would be remembered forever.